Moving on to what we're working on tonight, which is the workshop. Once again, my initial idea of this was everybody would be able to have the same virtual machine running on their own machine and clicking things at the same time and following along with me clicking things. Unfortunately, that didn't happen this month, but we do plan on having another workshop this year where we'll be able to do that. Like I said, the virtual machine is out there for download. If you'd like to go back after this class is over and download it at home or someplace else and go back over, you can rewatch this video. It's going to be on the Twitch video. It's also going to be uploaded to YouTube, so if you want to go back and go over things, you can do that. It's also just, it's going to have a Windows server on the virtual. It's going to have SQL Server installed. It's going to have a VentureWorks data warehouse already installed on there as well. So if nothing else, if you just want to have some an already put together sandbox out there, it's going to be out there for a few weeks. Is my plan, is keeping it out there for a few weeks, and then you just want to play around with it or do whatever, it's going to be out there. So hopefully, if that interests you, that you'll take advantage of that. So let's move on to real quick. I want to just show exactly how it is that we get to play around. For those who maybe haven't seen or have seen, and if you have seen and know how this works, then sorry, you just have to sit through it. But I just want to be real clear on exactly the steps that you have to take to get to what I'm going to show you tonight. Okay, so here we have the Monday, April 15th SQL Server Workshop. This is on Meetup. This is under OKC SQL. It's the event. It's out there. Everyone should be able to see it. If you go down to the details, you'll see two links here. The VirtualBox, which we're going to be using tonight, although I didn't know this, but if you have a Windows machine, you have Windows Hyper-V already natively installed, which is really cool, which means you can you don't need to use VirtualBox if you don't want to. But VirtualBox is totally free, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's a pretty easy to use interface. So we're just going to go and show exactly what happens when we click on this. It's going to take us to VirtualBox. So this is for right now, and for if you want to go back, like I said, in the future, you'll be able to go through these steps again. You'll go to VirtualBox and just download it, okay? Download it and install it. And when you do, you're going to get something that looks sort of like this. So this is what it looks, minimize and maximize. This is the VirtualBox interface. Now, as you can see, I already have the virtual machine running here, but this is what you want to get to without this SQL Workshop. So that's the first thing that you're going to need if you want to go the VirtualBox route. This other thing is the VM that we're going to be on. This is available on Dropbox. You're going to click on the Dropbox link if this is what you want to do. It's going to say it's almost 10 gigs, so it's a pretty sizable download, and you're just going to download it, okay? It's going to be a zipped file that you're going to need to unzip. Whenever you unzip the file, it's going to look like this. This is a virtual hard disk. Again, you do not need to use this with VirtualBox necessarily. You can if you want to. You can use Hyper-V if you want to. You can use, what's the other really popular? VMware. You can use VMware. I'm sure there's several other ones that you can do. But the important thing is that you get the, this is the virtual machine right here, okay? This is what happens when you download the zip file and you unzip it, okay? So now that we've got that unzipped, you're going to go into VirtualBox. I already have one running, but I'm going to do another one, okay? So we're going to do virtual, let's see, let's name it just SQL Workshop example. I don't know if you actually need to set this, but you want to make sure that you set your, no, that's not what I want, sorry. You want to set your default file to the right place. So in this case, I'm going to go to just my user, and then I have a folder, VirtualBox VMs, and you can see I have other VMs in here. So you're going to select that folder if you want to. I'm not sure if that does anything in this case, but we're going to do it anyway. Next thing we're doing is we're selecting the OS. In this case, we're using Windows Server, okay? So we're going to use Microsoft Windows, and I can't remember which version, but we're going to use other Windows 64-bit. Okay, so this is the first step. So you're going to just name your virtual machine, your default location, Windows. This is important. These, you can do whatever you want really on your own machine, but this is important. Windows and other Windows. You're going to set your RAM. Now, this gives you a good idea. You might be able to see this is green and red bar right here. As you can see, I have 16 gigs of RAM on my machine, so I can pretty comfortably give, if I want to, up to 8, I would say. 8 gigs of RAM that I'm going to dedicate to this virtual machine. If you want more information on how virtual machines work, I give a little bit more insight on my last talk. That's available on YouTube. That's also linked on the Meetup page. So we're going to select Use Existing Virtual Hard Disk File. This is what you downloaded and unzipped before, okay? You're going to select wherever that is. You need to add it here. So in this case, you can see right where I placed it, where I unzipped the file. That's what you're selecting, okay? So this, once again, this is what we unzipped. We're selecting that, choosing it. As you can see, unzipped, it's almost 20 gigs, which is not too awfully bad for what it is, but it's not tiny. And then we're going to just create it. And as you can see, this is going to be the exact same thing as what's already running, the SQL Workshop, okay? So if you're doing this at home, this SQL Workshop example that I just did, that's the steps you need to get to that. There's a few other things. I'll just show you real quick. If you want it to be a little faster, maybe you got a little more horsepower, you can go here to Settings, System, Processor. Let's say you want to give it another CPU if you want to. And you can do things like that. And you can tinker around and play, but the important thing is getting it added there. And the steps are really similar if you don't want to use VirtualBox, if you want to use VMware or Hyper-V. Really similar steps, okay? So whenever we get to it, we're going to hit Start, and then we're going to get to the SQL Workshop. This is the virtual that we'll be on tonight. So this is what it looks like, okay? We're just going to go over this is what our plans are for tonight, okay? So these are going to be some basic sort of DBA tasks, okay, that you might see if you were a DBA. They're not overly complex, but if you're not a DBA, you might not know what to do, and so we're going to go through a little bit of troubleshooting. Now, the idea here is that I'm going to want to help guide things, but I also want some input from those of you that are watching, okay, what you think we should do next, and then we can explore different things, okay? And this might be really fast if it's too easy, or we might dig into a few things. And I also want to make note that don't think of me as like a SQL guru or anything like that, okay? I didn't start doing this all that long ago. I just sort of somehow found myself wearing the SQL user group crown for some reason. I just sort of happened into it. So, you know, take everything I have to say and, oh, did you have a question?
Quick question.
Oh.
Skull Crusher for life.
Oh, right, Skull Crusher.
We were supposed to ask if the hard drive and virtual hard drive set to dynamic allocation.
It is. So, right, it's set to dynamic allocation already, which that means is that it's taking up 20 gigs of space on your hard drive, the virtual machine. So we'll just go back to what we were talking about. So whenever we use this virtual machine, the location is right here under VMs and SQL Workshop example. This is it right here, this disk image. It was about 20 gigs. That's how much space it takes up on your hard drive right now, okay? As you can see, it says 40 gigabytes right here. So what does that mean? That means that in the virtual machine, it has its virtual hard drive shows 40 gigabytes of space. Okay, so it shows we can put stuff on this hard drive up to 40 gigabytes. Okay, but in reality, on the physical machine, it's only going to take up the space that it's actually using, okay? Now, where you get into trouble is if you get a whole bunch of these things running at the same time, a bunch of virtuals, and you have it dynamically allocated, you can fill up your drive, potentially. So, but we're only running one of these, so dynamically we feel pretty comfortable just running dynamically. Does anybody have any questions about that? I don't always do the best job explaining. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'll try to answer them best I can. So just to show you, I actually split the virtual hard drive into a few different pieces. This is kind of interesting. So as you can see here, this is about 28 gigs of space right here on this virtual hard drive. Then I created a 4 gigabyte data drive, a 4 gigabyte log drive, and then a 4 gigabyte temp DB. So this is sort of not really what the night's supposed to be about, but sort of best practice to separate your data on your SQL Server. Okay, so ideally you don't keep your backups. In this case, we have backups on our data drive. The whole point of having backups somewhere is so that if the drive fails, we have backups. That's one of the purposes. So if you keep them on the same drive as your data is on, it sort of defeats that purpose. But since we only have this one drive, this is what we're doing this time. But just to cover it real quick since we're on it, if a data drive fills up, so that's where our database lives in the SQL Server, if that fills up, then, and we have it on a separate drive, it'll only kill the drive that it's on. Does that make sense? So this F drive right here, if it fills up, all 4 gigabytes get filled up by a database, then the database will crash. Bad things will happen to the database. But if we keep all of that on C, where everything is running, it'll be bigger issues. Question? A jump drive. So the question is it bad practice to keep this stuff on a jump drive? What sort of stuff do you mean? Like the virtual machine? I don't think that. That's a good question. I sort of probably depends on your jump drive. So if you have a really slow one, you're probably gonna have real slow performance. But I mean, the whole idea here is it's supposed to be a sandbox, and it's totally doable to have your storage on a jump drive. You can keep this entire thing living on a jump drive. But if it's really slow, then it's gonna be really slow, and then you have a little bit of latency there as well, and other things. So if you have the space, I would. You don't have to worry about the jump drive falling out or anything like that. There's a few other things, but there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, especially if it's something you don't mind if it goes away anyway, if that makes sense. So you also notice that, just as a side note, the Temp DB, we go ahead and fill that out all the way because we don't want it. We're not going to set it to grow. We're not putting anything else on that drive, so we just grew it out already, which is why it's already full. Anyway, that's a total side note, though.
When you say temp DB, what are you storing in that?
So that's the actual. Let's open up SMS real quick. So Temp DB is one of the system databases. So the purpose of Temp DB is you'll have a lot of data written to Temp DB whenever you're running queries and doing data manipulation and things like that. Okay, so whenever you do that, you have Temp DB. Every database lives on a part of the disk, on wherever you're having it, whether it's solid state or if it's a spinning disk or wherever. It exists somewhere, and that includes Temp DB. So whenever you have Temp DB, you want to, because you can run queries that can blow up and go crazy and do bad things, and you can have multiple queries running at the same time. You would rather queries fail in Temp DB than crash an entire data drive. Does that make sense? So it's going to go really slow because it's only on part of this semi-decent laptop. Yeah, it's all right. I upgraded the RAM, which I was very proud of. It was all the way under the motherboard. I was like, had to take the top off and like, but anyway, beside the point. So there's Temp DB right there. So on installation of SQL Server, I pointed Temp DB to live on its own little island, which is H over here. Okay. So, and also, like I said, I sort of like these sort of going off on these sort of tangents on things. I don't know how long going through all these steps are, but this is kind of, I think it's fun to sort of poke around and talk about how the SQL Server works. So if you guys are all right with that, I'm just going to we'll go off on little tangents here and there, and we're just going to run with it. And I forget what else I was doing. Let me just show you guys what I did too, just because, why not? So whenever this was created, the server had a 40 gig virtual hard drive, like we've talked about already. And as I showed you, now we have a data drive, we have a log drive, and we have Temp DB along with C. So what I did was I right-clicked and went to Disk Management. Then I found C, which was one big partition. And I went ahead and right-clicked here, and we shrunk the volume. And then you can decide on how much you want to shrink. As you see, I did 4 gig partitions here. But we could do another one. We have room. So, I don't know. Let's see, it's supposed to do it in increments of 10, 24. So let's see, 10, 24, 20. Let's just do 2 gigs. 20, 40, that's easy. So we're going to do, that's how much we're shrinking. So it's going to look on the drive on C, and it's going to find space. Ta-da! That's unallocated, so we're going to make a new volume. And we're just going to use whatever's on there. And this is E. And then we can name it whatever we want. So we did data before. This is like example. I'll just make a backup partition. And okay, well, we couldn't do another one. Well, there you go. That's how I did those other ones. We don't need another one anyway, so I'll add this back later. But that's how we created these 4. Just to show you, you created these 3. Alex. Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay, so with this tool, he's saying you can't merge 2 parts or 2 separate volumes that aren't adjacent to each other. Good to know. So yeah, that's how we did that to create these other ones. Like I said, we didn't need that 2 gigs anyway, so whatever. Who cares? In real life, I would go and re-add that back, but I don't care right now. So let's just get to the first part of this. Do you have what, Randy? Oh, I just scratched in the head? Okay. Couldn't tell. Oops, that's not what I wanted. All right. This might seem sort of easy, but the first thing we're going to do is turn on the SQL agent. Now, maybe not all of you know what the SQL agent is or what it does, but SQL agent, I guess, I don't know if I'm defining it exactly right, but you use the SQL agent to run jobs on your SQL Server. And it probably has more uses than that, but that's sort of the primary thing that we've used it for in the past, or I've used it for personally. So we're going to go ahead, and we're going to do most things just through the GUI. You can script out everything, but you can also do things through the GUI, and it's easy to remember through the GUI. So unless you're doing it every day, then might as well do it through the GUI, I guess. So this is the SQL Server Agent. Does anyone know how the best, or a way that we could turn on the SQL Server Agent? Oh, Randy, he's excited. Those you can't see online, but he is excited. You can. He's right. So you can right-click here and go Start. That's the cheater way to do it. And we had a failure. Burr, burr, burr. Oh, I had no idea this would happen. Actually, just while we're here, we'll show configuration. We're just going to go to, just to show you guys what the configuration manager is like. And like I said, if you've seen this 1,000 times before and you're like, this is too easy, then I'm sorry. But I'm trying to make it well-rounded for everyone. And so, because this definitely, whenever I was learning this stuff, was not easy to me. I was like, what is going on? Here's the configuration manager, and you can also right click and hit start here. Now, does anyone think it's going to work this way? We just tried it. Oh, we got a yes. It's going to work. It's going kind of slow. Is it the VM or is there a problem? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Anyone know any jokes or no? Okay. All right, I'm just going to tell you it's not going to work. What should we do now? Does anybody have any ideas? What should we do? Check the error log. We had a few hands up over here. Right click and go to properties. Okay. And what do you want to know? What was that? The user account? What should we check about it? This is the correct user account. What's that? The service? Go to service, okay. So it's on manual. We also had a logs. Does anybody think we should check the logs too? I think we should just because. Is there anything anybody notice anything in here? No, we'll just move it. We can come back to that if we need to. Okay, so where should we go to? Where do we find the logs at? Do we go to, is it on SQL Server? Should we be checking the OS? Anybody have any ideas? Randy's like, yeah, I know exactly. Event viewer? Okay. Yeah. So we're going right to, for those who aren't familiar with everything that's going on, this is part of the OS. The event viewer is part of Windows Server. What we have running back here is SQL Server. Those are two separate things. I mean, they work together, but SQL Server is an application that we installed onto the OS. So again, just breaking it down for the first timers, if anybody who's interested. Yeah, question. Oh, yes, that's a great question. I forgot to include that, and I will go back on Meetup. Make a note. Can you make a note for me to add that? The password is just capital P @SSW0RD. So it's just password, sort of the standard weird password. So again, capital P @SSW0RD. That's how you get into the box. Great question. That's why we love Skull Crusher, who is allegedly down in Florida. Could be anywhere though. You never can trust those internet people. I know. Yes, probably in Russia. Because that's a great point. Okay, so where should we click around here? Let's click around a few of these things. Anything? Where should we go? Let's just try it. I'm just going to click on application. All right, so what do we see in here? There's a few errors. Let's see, I don't know what these are for. Maybe. So this is part of the troubleshooting thing, right? Is you have to decide what you see. Is it useful information or is it not? It's sort of like all data, you have to actually pick what is useful and not. So you look at something like this and it's a license activation failure, and that probably doesn't have to do with the agent, right? What's that? Filter by source or sort by source? I'm going to be trying to click appropriately, but no promises I'll do a great job. You could do that. Okay, you guys want to try that? Let's do that. Let's sort by time. Which, is this the most? No, this is the opposite of, wait. 115. Wait a second. Oh, it's putting us all the way at the bottom. Stupid. Okay, so yeah, 412. Gosh, 415. Okay, so it was right. Okay, so let's go out to the very top, and here's some SQL stuff. So we're gonna go and we're gonna go this way, the cheater way, the Randy way, and we're gonna kick it off, and it's gonna it's like trust me, man, I already tried this. There might be clues here too, maybe not, but does anybody see anything here? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There you go. So we maybe didn't notice this the first time, but it actually says right here what maybe our problem is. A logon failure. So if it's a logon failure, we were sort of heading in the right direction. I'm not sure. I feel like it was one of you two. We're talking about the user, maybe looking about the user. That's probably the right direction, would be my guess, since it's a logon failure. So SQL, we're just going to cover this real quick, because I sort of just grazed over it earlier. These are very important parts of SQL Server. So let's just talk about them real quick. This is SQL Server itself, the application, okay? Whenever the SQL Server is on, this service needs to be running, okay? This is, as you can see right here, SQL Server, okay? This is our default installation, also known as instance. This is what's running right now. Now, you have to have a logon, a user account associated with each of these services, okay? We're just gonna ignore browser, although I'm curious, does anybody know what the browser is used for? Bonus points if you can get it. Oh. What? SQL servers? Close. That Alex had his hand up. Come on, man. What's that? Good guess, but no, it's actually going this way. Gene, did you say something? Different instances. So different installations. So you can have one default installation on any given box, and other installations are what we call named instances. And you can actually, you need the browser to be on to have named instances running on the same box. So it's just another installation of the application under a different name on the same box. That's when we have browser running. We do not want it running at any other time. Typically, if you don't need something turned on, you want it off because of security loopholes or Windows. It pretty much in general, that's just sort of a rule of thumb. If you don't need it turned on, turn it off. Okay. And then we have the agent, which we sort of talked about a little bit earlier. But like I said, we have, so the default user, as you can see up here, I didn't even change the default user here, which I probably should have. I actually thought I did, but I didn't. You can set, this is the default user, and you don't want to use the default user. And why wouldn't we want to use the default user for things like this? Yeah, security, right? So people can, if you know what the default credentials are for things, you can exploit that if you want to. So we want to make things as secure as possible. So we typically wouldn't use the default, default passwords, things like that. Yeah, exactly. Even like your admin stuff, you typically, if you don't need it on, you don't want to use it. But anyway, so I created these user accounts, and it doesn't really matter, but it's through Windows. So this is back to Windows configuration. Like I said, this is a tangent, I know, and I don't want this to go super late, but we're just going to go with it and see how it goes. Whenever I created these user accounts, we went to the server manager, and I went to users and groups. Whenever you do stuff like this, you want to create a group. Service accounts is the group. That's just the name I gave it. And the reason why you want to put users in groups is why would we want to put users in groups whenever possible? We have several hands coming up. We'll go John. No, let's go Alex this time. Last time you just talked. Yeah, easier to manage. Yeah, right. So different permissions, right? So if you want to give access to the developers, let's say, you have a bunch of users, they're all developers, and we want to give all of them access to a database or something like that, then we give the group permissions, and then we don't have to click through every single person. It's a lot easier that way. It's easier all around. Now, this is sort of stuff that's like, you're typically going to have a sysadmin, hopefully, that's going to be doing this stuff for you. This isn't really database administrator stuff necessarily, really, but you need to have service accounts. You should be having service accounts run. So if your system administrator doesn't know this stuff, that's why it's important to know it. So even though it's not your job necessarily to create the service accounts and groups, you need to know how it's done so you can tell whoever's in charge of that to do it. Does that make sense? Question? DBAs might do it in prod. It just depends on what your hierarchy of, or your division of I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know, if you have different places have different jobs, right? So maybe your sysadmins at one place, maybe at let's just say at Love's you have your sysadmins that they handle all the user account creation, but maybe you have a 5-person small company and the DBA just sort of handles all that stuff. That might be a possibility. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you're a DBA and you're installing SQL Server, let's say that you're moving to SQL Server or something, you had Excel before, and you're putting everything in SQL Server, this is absolutely stuff that you should know so that you can tell whoever's in charge of creating these accounts that you need to have them do to do this. Question?
Different access levels, like for developers, you may want them to only have read access in production, or you may want them to have write access in a test sandbox.
Yep, exactly. So some real world examples where you might need different privileges for different groups.
I think that's something to do with
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, exactly, yeah, exactly. So the separation of, what am I trying to say? Separation of job, what was that? Roles, yeah, job roles, yeah, there you go. That's the idea of having a system administrator. You have to go to them and have that stuff done. So yeah, exactly. So anyway, tangent, but I think a good tangent, hopefully. So there's the group, and then here are some of the users, and we can just look at the users in the group too. So as you can see, I just did whatever the service was that might have been running. We don't have integration, but because I just went bare bones, I just named it whatever SQL agent. So we have the agent, the engine, the browser, and then they all are applied, as we saw, to the appropriate ones beside the browser that got. Let's try to actually, can we change that? Let's see. So let's just do this just to show. So I clicked on the browser properties, and this actually might work out. And I could just enter the name here, or we can go to advanced, and let's see. Yeah, we want a user. So we can just also scroll through the users here. And we can find browser. So if you weren't sure what the exact name was, this right here, in case you don't know the beginning part, that's just wherever domain you're on. In this case, we just have this, we're just on our own. This is just our computer. That's what this win, I didn't change the name of the computer, but that's what this win, blah, 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 slash SQL browser. So we're gonna do SQL browser, and then we're gonna have to enter the password, which again is what I said before, password. And then I'm going to fat finger this or something. Oh, it's disabled. Okay, well that makes sense. So this is something that we were probably, that's why we wanted to look at service earlier, wasn't it? Because it could have been disabled. So as you can see here, this is manual, and maybe we want to, let's just try, we have to apply it first probably. This is sort of going a little bit too far off of what I wanted to do, but maybe, I don't know if that actually worked. Okay, you know what, we're just gonna abandon that idea. But anyway, what we wanna do is we just wanna turn that on to manual, turn it on with the existing account, using the existing, this NT authority, make the service manual so that we can turn it on. Then we would apply SQL Browser, that user, right, that service account, and then we would disable it again after the fact. But we're just gonna leave it disabled. Hopefully the general idea got across. And like I said, some of this, especially depending on your level, if you don't understand exactly, it could be me. But if you want to just go back, this will be out on Twitch, the videos, again, twitch.tv/Techlahoma, but will eventually find its way onto YouTube. So let's get back to the very first thing that we're supposed to be doing, which is turning on the agent. So given how I was talking about how the browser goes, does anybody have any proposals for what we should try? Yeah, I hear something? You're just mumbling over there, man. Oh, okay. I can give him a hard time in case you guys don't know, because he's been coming for a while, you know, so I gotta give him a hard time. Do we have any proposals for what we should try now? We know that we see that it was a logon failure, and we know that we have the user SQL agent here. Maybe it doesn't have the right permissions. Okay, the user doesn't have the right permissions. We had another hand over here.
Well, I never told you the password.
Okay.
We know that it has the right password.
Let's try that, because maybe the password got messed up. Somebody changed the password. Okay, so that we are able to apply that. That's a good sign. And look at you. Johnny boy back there. That's why we hired him on. That's why he's running the stuff back there. That's why they pay him the big bucks. No, so now you can see it's running. So something happened with the password there. And I know this is sort of a silly example that you would hope that you wouldn't see really in the real world too much, but the troubleshooting process was what I was trying to get across. And I think that there's a lot of good suggestions along the way that eventually led us to re-entering the password. And John, I didn't tell you what the answer was earlier. He just figured it out on his own. So do we have a question? We have one over here. The SQL error? Oh yeah, we didn't actually end up going back over here. Yeah, so we tried running that again. Oh wait, this is the wrong thing. So we have the event viewer. It's somewhere in, I don't think it's in application or security. Yes. It's a good thing you said under management, because I was like, it's around here. I would have just been clicking around the logs. The logs here? Is this what you wanted to see? Let's see. So what we want to do here, you might think, you can see there's nothing here, and there's a ways, let's see. Is it search? No, that's not what we want. You can set it to where it only shows errors, but it's been too long since I've done this stuff. You would think that it would be under agent, but if you scroll down, that's all that's in there. And there's no errors. And I believe it's, I don't know if it's here. Oh, gotta get this out of here. I might have done too many things. Way to go, Jimmy. Idiot. This is also sort of a problem for VMs that they're going off of your host hardware. It's like, oh, we gave it 2 cores, but like, it's not really enough. Yep. And it's somewhere around here. I know I saw this earlier somewhere. It's in one of these things. I feel like it was maybe here. Here we go. So there's the error and you would see the same thing in the event viewer too. Right. Well, yep. Clicked on the wrong one, but yeah, you're totally correct that username or password. But I'm in the event viewer, like I was saying, I'm pretty sure it would have showed the exact same thing. It's sort of interesting, like I said, because and thank you for pointing out that we might as well just continue down this path, but because it's a great point. This is actually what I was sort of the initial in my mind was walking through, get to this point, and then you see it plain as day, but then it happened this way. But as you can see, it shows the value of actually looking in the logs. It shows exactly right here, the username or password is incorrect, and then we wouldn't have even had to guess, so. So the question is the first, and I'm just going to try to repeat all the questions for those watching online. The question is the first step in troubleshooting to go to the logs and see what more information we can get? It depends on what the answer is. I think the answer depends on what the problem is. So in this particular scenario, yeah, I think that's the right case because it gave us an error. We can look in the logs and hopefully find some more information. But there's so many different problems that you could have that generally speaking the logs are totally legit first place to go, and I would say, but I don't know if it's 100%, but most of the time you will probably find some more information in there. Yes?
What's the minimum level of permissions that you have to have to even have access to these logs if you are, say, a read-only database user?
What level of permissions do you need to have to be able to see these logs? There's this, I think you need to have, that's a good question. I don't want to give an exact answer because I don't know off the top of my head. Did somebody have an answer over here? I'm sure that's easily Googleable. View server state? Yeah. Yeah, the answer is out there. Like I said, I'm sure. I hesitate to just say off the top of my head because I just honestly don't remember. But yeah, there's definitely a level at which you can see and cannot see. So, all right, moving on. 7 o'clock. I sort of my goal is I think 7:30-ish to try to be wrapping up. So I might go a little bit faster on a few of these next ones because I want to give people time to chat and hang out and ask questions and things like that and network. I think networking is a huge thing as part of this group. That's one of the things I really like about the group. So that being said, we're just going to move on from this question to the second one. So the first one was sort of a quiz, I guess, and then we're going to do just a backups next. Okay, so those of you who have restored a database before in the past shouldn't be too tricky. Like I said, we're going to do everything through the GUI because I like the GUI and it's really easy. Again, you can do everything through the GUI. You can script it out. I'm pretty sure there's every single thing. I'd be surprised if there's anything that you could only do through the GUI. So, but an easy thing to do is right-click database and hit Restore Database. As you might notice, we already have AdventureWorks Data Warehouse 2016 in here, but we're going to try restoring AdventureWorks, the non-data warehouse, just AdventureWorks 2017. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click on Device, Add for the media, and then it defaults to backup. We have a default backup location which we showed earlier. And as you can see, here's AdventureWorks 2017, okay? So we're just gonna hit okay, it's gonna set everything up, there it is. Now we could rename it. This is important if you ever are just restoring in general. Let's say that you want a copy of your database to be on the same server, but you're gonna mess around with it or something. You can always change the name of your database to test_test, something like that if you want to. So this is where you would change the names there. You can move the file locations. As you can see, the default location is where we talked about earlier. It goes to the data drive and the log drive. Now, we wouldn't want these to go directly to data and log probably if we had a bunch of databases. It might make more sense to put things in their own folder. So you might want your data to go under data AdventureWorks 2017. But in this case, we're just going to put it under data just because it's too much work to do other stuff. And it's just for an example anyway. Now here, stuff to look for back here, if we are overwriting an existing database, we want to click this checkbox right here, and we can restore with recovery or no recovery or standby. I've never done standby before, but typically you'll do either recovery or no recovery. Can anybody explain what the difference between recovery and no recovery is? Randy, before I even finish the question, he's got his hand up. Okay, what do you got to say? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly right. Randy's got all the answers. For those who didn't hear, what? I got you, John. So for those who didn't hear, online or otherwise, no recovery is a state in which we can, transactions are left open, so we can add additional backups to the database, okay? So we cannot write to the database in this state. It's just gonna sit there. Now, like I said, typically you're gonna leave it in no recovery so that you can add other backups to it, so other transactional log backups or differential backups. Another thing that you might do is leave your database in no recovery if you're joining it if you're using a later version of SQL Server to an availability group. An availability group allows us to join a cluster and fail over the database. So that would be another case where we'd need to leave it no recovery. But the same general premise, we don't want to write to the database, we want to keep it in its state, and we want to add new transactions to the database. So we're going to restore with recovery though. Now, one thing I like to do, we can just hit OK, but I like to script out by hitting this button right here, okay? And it's going to go really slow because it's on a virtual. I'm just going to close that. I'm going to get this out of the way so we can see. And then you can actually see what it looks like. Oh, did I hit move? Oh, okay. Well, maybe it looks a little weird, but this will work. This syntax is correct. This will work fine. So you don't need to have these moves here, but I don't know what I did and I already closed the window. It should work just fine. Or should it? We'll find out. So you can hit F5 or execute. Before you run anything, always make sure you're pointed to the right place. In this case, we only have the one server that we can see. There's only one thing in this whole environment, but be careful before you run things, because if you have a production environment versus a testing or development environment and you run things on production, that's a good way to not have a job as a DBA. So we're going to hit execute and see what happens. And nice thing about this is you can see how long it takes, and it'll give you the error spelled out for you real nice. I don't know if it'll give you quite this length. And we can go to the logs and see the same. I think in this case it would be probably the same message in the logs. But the restore failed, and it gives the example right here. But can anybody interpret what this error is saying? Database was backed up on a server running version 14.0.0.1000. The version is incompatible with this server, which is running version 13. So we have an answer over here. Correct. Yep. Yes. So for those who didn't hear, that is exactly right. This backup that we're trying to restore was backed up on a newer version of SQL Server. Now this is a pretty, like I said, this isn't terribly complex what's happening here, but if you've never ran into this before, this might be totally new to you. You cannot back up your databases and restore them to earlier versions of SQL Server. It is not possible. So this can be very problematic if you're doing migrations and you need to go down in your version number. And it's very important to note, so I wanted to include this just so that we all are on the same page, that this is AdventureWorks 2017 and we're on SQL Server 2016. So this was backed up on the newer version of SQL Server, and we can try to fiddle with this. There's nothing we can do. We cannot restore this on 2016. Now, if we wanted to get this data onto 2016, there's a few different options, but we can't take this backup and just restore it right on here. At least there's no way that I know of, unless there's something new out there. So, or some hack way, but not that I'm aware of. So we're just gonna, that one was just to show how that works, and we're gonna move on. Does anybody have any questions about that? Like I said, it's fairly straightforward, but got a question? Can you run two versions of SQL Server on the same machine and have them talk to each other? So I believe you could run two versions, one being a named instance, but I don't know for that for a fact. I think you can. Can anybody share whether you can? Okay, Randy's nodding his head, so that gives me great confidence. He's been right every time so far. So yeah, you can make a named instance, and then you can put them on the same machine. Just to throw this out there, it's tried most best practices say try to avoid named instances if you ever can, though. You can run into contention putting two SQL servers on the same machine where they're fighting against each other on the same hardware, you know. So if at all possible, we try to stick away from named instances, but that's not to say that they don't happen, but sometimes it's like, what happened to my performance? And it's like, well, your named instance was running a gnarly query or something, or some other query. Now, it sort of gets into some licensing things too, because if you have a server core licensing, you have all your cores on your server license, and then you might want to have a named instance there because you don't want to buy new licenses, but that's sort of like past what we really need to talk about tonight. I'm all down for going on tangents, but I don't think I'm going to go on that one too much. Okay, so this one's no tricks. I promise, no tricks. We're just going to back up this database, the data warehouse, okay? So to do that, we're going to go, again, through the GUI. We're going to right-click AdventureWorks, data warehouse, and we're just going to scroll on over to backup. Now you can see that we have a simple recovery model here. So we can take, I forgot that you could take a differential on simple. You might notice that there's no log recovery type here, backup type. And that's because, like I was saying, we are in the simple recovery model. Okay, for SQL Server, your simple recovery model it doesn't hold on to transaction, so you can't transaction logs. So we talked a little bit about this. Did we talk about this last meet? I feel like we talked about it recently. It'll be on YouTube somewhere. One of our last meetings we talked, I think we had a whole night on transactions if I remember correctly. So that was probably February. So if you're curious on a more in-depth analysis on the different recovery models, I'd check out our February YouTube video, but we're just going to select full. You can choose where you want to back it up to, or back it up to disk, and I don't think we really need to see. So these are a couple different things that are sort of important to note. Backup to existing media set, or backup to a new media set. This sort of makes a difference whenever sometimes you might want to have a is it here? You want to make you want to do a copy only sometimes. So if you go back up to an existing media set and you do a full database backup, and then you try to, so let me just give an example. I'm doing a terrible job already right out the door trying to explain this, but let me start over. Let's say that you have a database that is backed up weekly, okay, on Sundays, let's say, and then you have differential backups that are taken 2 times a week, okay? So, I don't know, Tuesday and Thursday. Well, let's just say, okay? So differentials aren't the full database. They're just changes from the last full, okay? So now you're on a Friday, right? And they say, we want Thursday's backup. That's what your boss tells you. So restore Thursday's backup. You need a full backup. You always need a full backup, and then you just need Thursday's differential. That's all you need. So you take the full from Sunday that runs weekly, and then you leave that in no recovery like we talked about. It'll do this all automatically, but that stays in no recovery. Then you also add the differential backup to that full, okay? And when you run that, it fails. Now, what might have happened is somebody took a backup, an ad hoc backup, so something not part of the normal schedule, the non-Sunday automated backups. Somebody took a backup that was not copy only, and now your differential, it's, like I said, your differentials changes from your last full. So whenever you take a new full that wasn't on Sunday anymore, let's say somebody took one on Wednesday, now you have to have your Wednesday full and your Thursday differential. That's why you're, gosh, it starts getting confused. I can tell that my words sound confusing. Anyways, it can make a difference if you want copy only, especially if you're not running things. You just got to be careful about it backing up to existing sets, media sets, okay? Sorry, I tried my best. It sounded way better in my head, and I start talking and blah, 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 blah. Question? Comment, question? Those are accepted. Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't give you the option to write over the previous data set, correct? That would be written out.
They wouldn't allow, the question is, if you tried to take a differential backup, you wouldn't be allowed to overwrite your existing data set. I think you would I think you just get an error. Maybe I don't know if you can overwrite it or not. I don't know. I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, I guess we could try to run something and run it again under the same, let's just do it real quick. Okay, so we're gonna just try to back up this database, okay? First, the full, like we were talking about, okay? We're just doing this for funsies. So we're backing this up to F, like we talked about. We hit script. This is not a copy only. And we're gonna hit execute. Now we can go to messages here, and it'll show you exactly how long it took. So if you have a really big backup, you might click on messages. There's also scripts you can run to see how far along a backup is. But it'll show you here. This is another reason why I like scripting it out, is you can see this. You look and, oh, it's 50% done, and it took this many, it took 2 seconds, you know. Correct. Yeah, it shows how fast down here. Yeah. So now let's do this. Let's go back here. Let's take a differential. Oop. And I'm pretty sure, like, we could just try. This is just gonna fail. Pretty sure. Is it gonna fail? No. It's not gonna fail. It's gonna overwrite it. We're getting predictions over here. All right, let's get some money on the table. Let's go. Wait. All right. I'm not sure if I'm understanding you correctly. Are you saying that if there's been no changes, then the differential? Yeah. Okay. Correct. Well, I just took a full backup. I can't work with any of them? Well, yeah, and I don't think I've ever taken a differential with a simple recovery, but okay. Well, we're just gonna try to execute it and see what happens, just out of curiosity. All right. Is everyone cool with that? Whoa, that's kind of cool. Wait a minute. So where did this go? Let's check it out. I'm sort of confused. I wonder if it's because they're different file types, even though we both had the same name. We can all learn together. Wait a minute, didn't I back it up there? Oh, I didn't back it up there. Where did I back it up to? Did I not? Sorry, this is sort of... Exactly. Did I overwrite it? I mean, that's where I went. F backup. F backup. So there it is. And you can see 717. Pretty sure this is where... Oh, wait. Yeah, Data Warehouse 2016. So I'm assuming that overwrote that? Okay, so that's what you were saying that was going to happen. Gotcha. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Correct. It'll just so what he's saying for those again who aren't listening, if you try to take a log backup and there's no full, it just won't work because it needs to be in reference to that full. So if you have a new database for the first time, you have to back it up, do a full backup. So something that might happen, sorry, I'm just taking a tangent off of that, more tangents. What might happen is you might have, maybe at your work you have a job that runs log backups every 15 minutes. You add a new database there, it tries to run the script that takes those log backups, and guess what? It fails because you have to have a full database backup in order to take a log backup of that database, right? You'd agree? Right. Correct. Right. Okay, so I see what you're saying. So in the database, in master, there's, what's that? Oh, is it in model? Oh yeah, yeah. One of the system databases, I don't think it's master actually now that you mention it. So system databases that we were talking about in MSDB probably. It's in one of these tables or view something. It records the full like we were talking about. So it says in there, okay, that's where it checks. I'm going to take a log backup of this database, let's say that we could, of AdventureWorks. Like I said, we have to have a full backup, okay? It checks the MSDB and it says, okay, does it have, we're asking to create a log backup. Do we have a full? And it also uses other information, but you have to have that full and a few other things, numbers associated with it. And if you do, then it says thumbs up, you can make a log or a differential backup. But as it's been pointed out, it doesn't matter if you overwrite the real backup that's living out there. You might only have one backup and you just overwrote it, but but SQL Server doesn't really care about that. It just cares that you made the backup in the first place. It doesn't matter if you backed up your database to a jump drive and you threw it away. It doesn't care. It just knows that you took a full, if that makes sense. And I guess it'll overwrite it too. So that was sort of like, yeah, there's your answer right there. I guess it will overwrite your stuff. So, which is not good. You don't want to overwrite your backups. It's sort of the point of backups. You want to hold on to them just in case. But yeah, that was a differential backup, and we just named it the exact same thing, and it overwrote. So interesting note there. Now, it's 7:22, so we really gotta go. Oh yeah, I really gotta go fast. So I wanted to make a backup job, but that's gonna take a long time. So I'm just gonna quickly show y'all what the basic step for that would be. So we're gonna have SQL Server, we're gonna have a job. We don't need to look at the jobs. We're gonna have a new job. And we're gonna name the job backups. We're gonna make a new step in the job. We're just gonna make this really simple. Backup is gonna be the step name. Now check this out. You can do, remember how we scripted this? This is, we know our database, this is the script for backing up this database here, right? Full backup. We just scripted this and ran it, and we know it works. So now we can go to this job step here, and we can just put in the SQL, put in the SQL right here. Now, as it was pointed out, if we run this on a schedule, we're going to keep overwriting previous, previous backups. So what we want to do, and maybe we even test this over here first, and if we were really doing testing, we could do copy only, like I talked about, with copy. I forget the exact syntax. But what we'd want to do is we'd want to, in here, just change our SQL and go get date. I'll just say get date here, as I'm messing something up. I don't. Yeah, but anyway, we're not going to get too much into what exactly I'm screwing up here. Get date. Maybe I have to punch in some. I don't know. 113. No, is it? Oh, you think that it's maybe? Let's see if that. It's still giving me the little red squigglies. I don't know what I did. It's been, but basically what we want to do here is we want to add the, we want to pull the time. What is it? The text? Well, it's been a hot minute since I've tinkered around with this sort of stuff. So there you go. That's what you're saying. I forgot about that. That's exactly right. Yeah. So this has to be a variable. So yeah. Anyway, at variable, and then you'd have to declare the variable up here. And okay, so it gets it's a little more complicated than I remembered it being. So yeah. But then here's the thing, though, is that this whole thing has to be, you can't just add this in here, that you have to make the entire thing a string, and then you have to execute the SQL string. So yeah, I forgot about all those steps. So just to show, we want to do, so we'd want to do declare, and then we do set variable, equal to get date, let's just say, and then we would do set at SQL equal to, then we do this, Oh, I thought that you could just, gotcha, like this, right? Or, yeah, it's still, do I need a, maybe I need this here. See, this is all just like stuff that I've done 100 times that I've forgotten about because it's been a few years. Oh, yeah. Do we need the equal? Okay. Okay, there we go. Oh, well, anyway, I'm messing up some stuff. I actually wasn't planning on doing, well, I was planning on doing this, but I forgot that they had to do so many little things. So we're just gonna pretend that this is the track you have to take. But the whole point of this thing is you're supposed to add the time into whatever your backup name is. But you can use the script that you already used, and then you add your variable in here. And like I said, this is I'm a little bit too out of practice. To be honest with you, I wrote this backup script that was like very comprehensive, and it looked at versioning, and you could type things in if you wanted to, or it would just do everything and different parameters. And then after I created that, I just used that every time. So it was a few years ago. So anyway, this is the kind of idea. So that was probably not as helpful as I would have liked, but we're just going to move on because I have one last thing that I wanted to go over, and then we'll call it. So sorry that one didn't go quite as I wanted to. But also we'd want to schedule it here. So you could have a new or an existing schedule. So if we wanted it weekly on Mondays. Yeah, and then at 12 a.m. you could do that. And then that's whenever it would run. If we had actually done the work and actually created that step appropriately, which we didn't. Anybody who's done any programming or done any SQL is like, oh, this guy's terrible. I'm sorry. I would have prepped more if I knew I was going to make myself look like a fool. Stupid idiot. What? Okay, he answered it himself. All right. So moving on real quick. Sorry, I know this starts, it's like, all right, we've been here a while. Let's just get this thing wrapped up. We're just going to do some permission stuff real quick. Two things about two different ways that you can log on to SQL Server. One is using Windows authentication, and the other is using SQL authentication. Okay, so like we talked about before, Windows is the OS that we're running on. Windows Server. Okay, 2019 or something. I can't remember what I used. Windows Server 2019. That's Windows authentication, is those users that we created earlier. We created those users in Windows, and you can give access to users or groups through Windows, right? Through those users. Or you can create a user in SQL Server that has nothing to do with Windows users, okay? So that's, I went ahead and created a logon using SQL, okay? So now here is the problem. We're going to try to connect to here, and we're going to use SQL Server authentication, and our login is test. So this is our new employee. His name is Test. He has no last name. And this is just, we do things by your name, so that's why we got Test. And he says that he or she, we don't know, they're from a different country, we don't know who, they're Skull Crusher. Hey, this is Skull Crusher. And we're just going to say, they're saying, hey, we can't log on, help me, my name is Test. And this is the login has failed. So what might we want to check if we're the admin of this server? Does anybody have any ideas of where the first place we would go to find out more information about this user? Management or security? Let's try security first. Anything on here? Let's try logins. So if we go to logins, there's Test, and you can actually let's take a look at Test. We'll just double click on him, okay, or her. So there's the password. I'll just you can select different permissions here for the server. Now, login permissions are different than the database. You can give permissions at a server level or at the database level. Okay, so if we give somebody an admin privilege at the server level, they have access to whatever, everything, all the databases. But sometimes we might only want to give access to certain databases or certain things. So this is where you would do that. And you can map users to different databases and things like that in groups. You can give, like, let's say we wanted to do that here. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. And let's just keep going on. Does anybody see anything on this page that might be a problem? That's a good eye. Softballed that one up for you guys, though. You guys hit it out of the park, though. You did it. You saw it. So we're going to hit grant, and let's see what happens. So this is sort of an exercise in where do we go on if we have login issues. And let's see if it worked. So again, Windows authentication is whatever the user is that's logged into the machine. And we're going to use SQL Server authentication because this is in SQL itself. And so we already logged into the box. Now we're logging into SQL separately here, okay? So let's type in, this is password, just like we've been doing on everything else, and boom, it works. So now we can verify it works. Let's say that we wanted to give this user access to that, to the database that we have. Let's just go back real quick and do that. That was another thing that I wanted to do, but we'll just show that we want to map it over here and we want to make them a DB reader, a data reader. So we want them to be able to query the database but do nothing else. We don't want them to be able to write to it or anything like that. So we can give them permissions here. You can also go down to the database and change permissions there, but now we're going to select, make a new query. You can see we're logged in as test here, so it's because I was highlighted this when I hit new query. And then I had a open a file. Let's see, I just had this little test query that was, yeah. Okay, so this is just, we want to make sure that we can test. And as you can see, we're logged in with test. We know that the user has access and can read. And that's all we wanted to double check. So if you wanted to add those permissions there, that's how you would do that. So yeah, that was kind of all that I wanted to talk about. I know I went off on a lot of tangents that some of them might have been understandable, others maybe not so much. But I appreciate everybody showing up tonight. Hopefully there was some useful information. If you would like to rewatch this and download anything, we're going to have the Twitch video and we're going to have the YouTube video up eventually. If you have questions that you want to ask me directly, techlahoma.slack.com. Go there and create a user. Or oh, did I get it backwards? Oh, gosh, just sometimes you're just off your game, you know. Slack.techlahoma.org. Create your Slack user. Then go to techlahoma.slack.com. Oh, so okay, I'm not totally crazy. I got the second half. Okay, and then you'll be joined on Slack. Just search OKC SQL, and I'll be in there. There'll be other people in the community in there, and any questions, we'll try to do our best to answer them, or just hang out and say hi. Like I said, wish us happy birthday. Does anybody have any questions on anything though? Because while we have a few extra minutes. If not, that's totally fine. You can ask me after or just chat. Question?
I thought to go with the payment might be because we could see what the database spits back when they try to create or update something.
Okay. Yeah, we could do that real quick. Let's see. let me think of the easiest way to test. So what the request was, we're using the test user. Let's try to write to the database and see what happens. We could try something like, ooh, whoops. Zoomed in on that. That might have been helpful for you guys though. Let's do insert into, and then we're just gonna put everything that's in there, we're gonna reinsert back into it. I think that should work. Well, it shouldn't work, but so we're just pulling, saying everything from insert into this table, put everything into this table. And it should fail. Okay, an explicit. I didn't say what? Oh. Ah, I see. Because there's an identity column, so there's a primary key. Well, that's not going to allow us to do that unless I do add some other things. So I'll tell you what. Since the VM's out there, go ahead and try it at home and follow those steps, because we could play around with it a little bit more, but it'll take me a few minutes just to make sure I get all the columns and all that. And I know there's fast ways, but it'll be a good thing to try out for anybody who's interested at home. Sound good? Cool. Any other questions out there? No? Well, again, thank you very much, everybody who decided to show up. Thank you to Addison Group for bringing the food. Appreciate it.